Tim Kurkjian, one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet, and one of the smartest baseball people I know. He has forgotten more baseball than I'll ever know, and we're thankful to have him here on the program. Tim Kurkjian, how are you?
I'm well, fellas. How's it going?
Very good, very good. Questions for you before we inundate you with baseball. We were just doing some nonsense a moment ago. What is the childhood fear you grew up with that you still have as an adult?
Fear of heights. I am really bad. I have trouble getting on a ladder. I'm not even comfortable being this tall. That's how afraid of heights I am. It's really bad. I mean, I have to be careful, like going certain places. It's pretty bad. Yeah. So that's it.
Oh, okay. All right. And the other question was, when Tim Kurkjian was a beat writer, columnist back in the day, in Baltimore, and he was looking for a late night meal, was there a go-to late night meal for Tim Kurkjian?
Well, everything was closed for our late night meal because I used to write until 12:30 every night, and by the time you were done, you were done. Now in Baltimore, sometimes on the way home, I would stop at Little Italy on the way home, but that was rare, but it was great. And back then, Little Italy was open until 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't think it's open that late anymore.
Did you have a go-to?
A go-to menu order?
Yes. Meal?
I'll eat any pasta dish. I love lasagna. I love ziti. I make chicken piccata and chicken marsala at home. They're not very good. We pray after we eat at my house, so pretty bad.
Well, pretty bad is the way that the Dodgers starting rotation has gone for them from an injury perspective this season. It feels strange, Tim. We were having this conversation here in LA about how people here are deathly afraid of the Dodgers' chances in this postseason. Like they are if they're exuding any confidence, it's false bravado, because all season fans have been, yelling and screaming about how they can't stay healthy, particularly in the rotation, et cetera, et cetera. What do you make of the Dodgers' chances, considering kind of the dire straits their starting rotation seems to be in?
Well, I have a slightly different view. To me, there are no great teams out there, no prohibitive favorites. First time since 2014 we don't have a 100-win team. The Padres have been really good since the beginning of the second half. But every team has a flaw. Every team has a weakness. And if you can exploit it, virtually any team could get to and win the World Series, and that includes the Dodgers. So, yes, if I were a Dodger fan, I would be worried about the starting rotation and the health of it. But there's also a chance they could just hit their way through any sort of starting pitching issues. I'm just saying the Dodgers have almost as good a chance as any team out there to go to and win the World Series, because I just don't see a team that you look at and go, well, they'll never beat this team. That's just not how baseball in 2024 has gone.
I have a theory, Tim, and you can feel free to disagree with this when I lay it out for you, but I think it's actually really good for the Dodgers that they had to play so many meaningful games towards the end of September, just because it's felt like their focus has needed to be higher than past seasons when usually they just run away with the division and September means nothing. How much do you think that could play a factor in their favor with this series?
Yes, it's certainly a factor, and there's so many other factors and for so many other teams. But, I'm a big believer, if you're really scrapping right to the end, you go into the playoffs much like the Mets in a situation where you've got some real momentum, you've got some real confidence, and it really works well. It happened to the Rangers last year. It happened to the Diamondbacks last year. So maybe this is going to work well for the Dodgers. Now, I think most teams will tell you they'd much rather win the division by 10 games and coast in and then get it going in the playoffs, because usually, like the Mets this year, it's possible they'll be, emotionally and physically exhausted after what they've been through when they open up in Philadelphia tomorrow night. But, yeah, it's certainly a possibility. All things are possible in this crazy baseball season where just when you think think you understand where the teams are, you realize you don't.
Tim Kurkjian joining us here, the great Tim Kurkjian here at ESPN, and an incredible baseball historian. With Shohei Otani making his postseason debut, can you recall a player that people had more anticipation for making their postseason debut than Ohtani? Like, how far back do you have to go to have this kind of hype behind a guy making his first playoff appearance?
I don't think you can get anybody bigger than him, in part because he's making $700 million. He just had a historic season. He finished with a run that was not to be believed, with that ridiculous stretch of hits and home runs and stolen bases. And he had the most games played among active players without a trip to the World Series. And he's in the prime of his career. So a lot of times when guys have to wait, they're usually, in theory, at the end of their career before they really get a chance to play. And he's not. He's right in the middle. So I think you could certainly make a case this is the most anticipated playoff debut by any player, because almost everything he does is different, unique, and a first time.
What I think is so interesting about this, Tim, with Ohtani is, the expectations are so high, and there is a hope from Dodger fans that he's going to be able to perform at this incredibly high level. But he's also a player that is only going to be able to impact a game 4 or 5 times because he doesn't play in the field. He just gets his at-bats, and that's it. How much can a guy like him, do you think, for lack of a better way of putting it, carry a team if need be?
Well, it's really, really hard in baseball. And this is why, basketball is, I think, so much more predictable than baseball, because Michael and Larry and LeBron touch the ball on every offensive possession. They control the game. Tom Brady, Joe Montana controlled it every time they got the ball. But in baseball, you can walk him 3 times and defensively he's not out there. He might have very little effect on the game. So this is why I generally never, ever give a baseball player a hard time for never winning a World Series, because so much is out of his control. And to me, that's one of the great beauties of the sport. And a lot of people disagree that the best player on the court or field doesn't always determine the game every night. Where when the Lakers are good and the Bulls were good and the Celtics were good, everything ran through the best players on the team, and they decided who was going to win the game. That's almost always how it goes. Baseball, it doesn't work that way. The 25th guy can win a baseball game, whereas the 12th guy on an NBA team,
right,
he's not even in the game at the end. And if he is in the game, there's no way he's taking the final shot.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Tim Kurkjian with us here. Tim, this time of year, everyone hates the manager unless you end up hoisting the trophy. So Dave Roberts is no different here in LA. We were actually having a pretty good debate earlier today here on the station about just kind of what could happen if things go south for them and they have another early exit. Managers are middle managers more and more now at this stage of the way baseball works than ever. What do you make of what Dave Roberts has accomplished? And do you believe it would be justified that he would be in harm's way if they did have another early exit?
I think he's done a great job in LA. The numbers are really, really good. Granted, he's had a lot of good players, a huge payroll, all these resources, and I don't think it would be justified to fire him if he didn't get through the first round. But that's just me. I think we blame the managers for way too much, and I don't think we give them enough credit for when they do really well. It's a really hard job now more than ever because of all the the interference and influence from within the organization. When I first started covering, Earl Weaver did whatever he wanted, and nobody was going to tell him what to do. We're starting to – last year, Bruce Bochy, they gave him the keys to the car and said, here, you drive it. And that's the way it should be. But it doesn't work that way with most managers. But anything's possible. I didn't see Tito Francona coming back and he did today. So anything is possible when it comes to managers in 2024.
Tim, you've been around baseball for a long time, and you were just talking about it not being justified in your mind that Dave Roberts would lose his job. From your perspective, when is it usually the time, like the right time, when it would make sense for a team to go in a different direction?
Well, it's hard to determine this, but I think you have to see if he's still got the attention of the players. It's an old cliche. He's lost the team. If you've lost the team, then it's time for the manager to tell everyone they're not listening to me anymore. This is essentially what Whitey Herzog did when he resigned as the Cardinal manager. He essentially said, this isn't working anymore. If the organization thinks that the players are no longer paying attention to what Dave Roberts says, and again, insert any team, any manager here, that's usually the time to do it. But it's really hard to tell that sometimes unless you get yourself down in the clubhouse and see it for yourself.
All right, Tim, before we let you go, our producer Lindsay is a huge Cleveland fan, so she gets the last question, one question about the Guardians. Go ahead, Lindsay.
So, Tim, how far do you think they're going to go? Do you think that this is just like lightning in a bottle, or do you think they have like a legit shot to like get to the World Series?
That's 3 questions.
Yes, they have a legit shot because, I repeat, everyone has a legit shot this strange year with no prohibitive favorite. The Guardians wouldn't be my choice to go to the World Series from the American League, but if you're asking me, can they advance, the answer is yes. Yeah. Somehow they find a way to score enough runs. They have decent starting pitching, but that bullpen is spectacular. And if it's not worn out, you can go a long way in October with a deep, versatile bullpen. And the Guardians bullpen is one of the best bullpens that we've seen in recent years, and I believe the best one in the game today. That gives them a chance.
Yeah, ask the 2015 Kansas City Royals, right? I mean, they rode that bullpen a long way to a World Series that year. The great Tim Kurkjian joining us here on 710 ESPN. Tim, you are a gentleman, a scholar, one of the nicest human beings ever. Thank you for giving us some of your time during a busy time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, fellas. See you.